In this video, I'm going to show you how to possibly restore a set of mountain bike brake pads after they've become contaminated or glazed. I say possibly because this doesn't always work, but in many instances it does. What happens is if you get any kind of lube, oil, or anything on your brake pads, it can render them almost useless or make them have a really awful noise when you brake, just a squeaking noise. In my case, on my trail bike, it's been sitting in my garage in humidity for a few months and hasn't been used because I'm in a race season right now where I've mainly been riding my cyclocross bike and my cross-country mountain bike. And so I found out that by sitting and not being used, the brake pads have become glazed over and I've got to restore them. So I'm going to show you in this video how to do that. The first thing that you need to do is pull the brake pads out of the bike, and I've got my bike in a work stand with the wheel off, and this is the rear one. And your brake pads are either going to have a cotter pin like this one or a little screw that goes in, a little bolt. And I'll just say that the cotter pin is a really bad design by Shimano. I wish they'd always use the bolts because I had one fall out one time on a ride and lost my rear brake pads. But anyway, so you're just going to pull the brake pads out of the caliper, and once you take that pin or bolt out, you'll just lift them up, and you've got a retainer spring inside. And by the way, wash your hands real good before you do this job, or wear gloves, little rubber gloves, because especially after we sand these down, which we're going to do in a minute, you do not want to touch the brake pads. You really try not to touch the brake pads at all. When I was pulling those out, they kind of fell out. So you try to pull them out as one and not touch the actual surface of the brake pad. And so I got them out, and I'm going to show you what to do to get the contaminants off. To do this, you're going to need some sandpaper, and you need something that's not too coarse. This is a 220 grit, kind of a finer sandpaper. And this is one that I got at Ace Hardware in a 3-pack. It's kind of a larger sheet that's designed for you know, sanding down wood or finishing wood. But we're going to basically just rub the brake pads on the sandpaper. So now that I have the brake pad, and before I do this, I don't know if you can see it in the video, but there's kind of some pitting on the brake pads, and they've got a darker finish to them. When we do this, the finish is going to lighten up a little bit, and those pits are going to come out, and that's what's causing some of the squeaking and the lack of performance on these pads. So all you're going to do is you're just going to take the pad in your hand, put it on the sandpaper, and kind of push down, not crazy hard, but you got to put some pressure on it, and you're just going to go back and forth, and you're going to see some of the surface come off. But you know, it's better than having to go out and buy a new pad. So yes, we're shortening the life of the brake pads a little bit, but it's not going to be too bad. And again, this allows me to continue using these pads without having to throw them out and get new ones. So just do this for maybe 20 seconds. And you know, if you look at it and there's still some pitting on it, just keep going for a few more seconds. Okay, so most of the pitting is coming out. And just kind of blow them off. And you'll see the surface looks a little bit different now. And I'm just going to do the same thing for the other pad, and then we'll put them back in the bike, and then I'll show you what to do after that. Okay, so I'm done with both brake pads, and again, when you do this, don't touch the surface of the actual pad. Okay, you just put your spring in the middle, put the pads back together, and then just drop them in the caliper until the holes line up so we can put our cotter pin or the bolt back through. And you may have to bend this cotter pin with a pair of needle nose pliers to get it straight so it can go in there. And then of course, if you're using a cotter pin, make sure you bend this out so you don't lose your brake pads. And if you're using a bolt-on one, the bolt that goes through, there's usually a pin on the other side. Make sure you put that pin back in. Alright, brake pads are back in the bike. Before you put your wheel back on, you're going to want to clean the rotor off, and you can either use some rubbing alcohol on a paper towel, a very clean paper towel or a very clean rag, or you can use brake clean. Now, this is something you can get at the automotive store. Both of these work. I typically use alcohol, and so I'm just going to put some on a paper towel, just kind of go around and wipe the rotor off. And what this does, if there's any contaminants still on the rotor that may be from, you know, they've been on the pads, you're just getting these off. And this is something that I do every time I clean my bike. I put some rubbing alcohol on a paper towel and very carefully clean the rotor. And when you do that on the bike, don't spin the wheel and try to clean the rotor, because you can get your fingers caught in that rotor, and that's not a happy ending. Alright, so now I'm going to put the wheel back on the bike, and we're going to do the final procedure to get the brake pads seated back in. So the last step of this procedure is to take your bike out on the street, and you're going to come to 10 full stops. You're going to get up to about 15 to 20 miles an hour. Use one brake at a time. So if you've done both, do the front 10 times, the rear 10 times. And so you're going to just use the brakes and come to a complete stop. And what this does is it'll seat in the pads. And you're going to notice the first few times you do this, you're probably not going to have a lot of power. The power should start to come back as you get to the end of the 10 stops. And it'll be finally completed when you get out on the trail and you ride for maybe 20-30 minutes. You should notice your brake pads being fully restored back to their normal power. If the brake pads have become too contaminated and the power is insufficient, then you're going to have to buy new brake pads, but hopefully this will work. Okay, so you'll notice when I did that, that squeaking noise is gone. I still don't have a lot of power. Gonna repeat this 9 more times and my power should start to come back. Okay, so the power is coming back on this one, so it worked for this, so hopefully it'll work for you. Thanks for watching.